Welcome to Conversations with HJM. I'm Lisa Harris-Jones.
And I'm Tommy Thompson.
And we're joined today by Mike Rosenbaum. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me, Lisa and Tommy.
So, you're running for governor. Tell me why. Why you?
So, talent is everywhere and opportunity isn't. And I've spent my entire life working on that problem. And the reason why I've spent my life working on that is that if you don't solve that, if you don't ensure there are pathways of economic mobility for every person, we fall into the ocean. Societies collapse. I started my career as an economist, working on these issues in the Clinton White House. But I felt like the assumptions were a little too conventional. We're really focused on things like stores, but not on people. And so I moved to Baltimore because there was a GM plant and a Bethlehem steel plant in Baltimore. And that those plants, in partnership with organized labor, had provided pathways into the middle class for a wide swath of society, including folks who didn't have college degrees. And those jobs were going away. And the question is, what's next? And so I started my first company to really figure out folks who may have been working in the GM plant or the Bethlehem steel plant if they had been alive several generations earlier, but weren't because those jobs had gone away, and provided support and training and pathways into tech jobs. And I grew that company to be a decent sized company. So we've created thousands of jobs in Maryland and elsewhere. And then I started a second company that did something similar in healthcare.
And that's workforce development, what you're talking about. And I'd like you to expand on that because you've done it as an entrepreneur, as a business person creating these businesses. Can you do that as governor?
So I think when we talk about workforce development, it actually minimizes sort of the real question we're talking about. Because what we're actually talking about is creating jobs and pathways into those jobs. And there are pieces of the system that you need to put in place in order to make that possible. When we look at the state budget, what we see is a budget that really is primarily focused on the symptoms of issues rather than the causes of issues. And we can actually fundamentally shift that. We can change how we think about cash flows in the state to create the jobs and the pathways into jobs that ensure actually that we can effectively guarantee a pathway to at least a middle income job for almost everyone. And if we do that, then we fundamentally change the equation, and that's actually what lets us change all the other systems that feed into that. The education system, the healthcare system, the criminal justice system, all tied to that question. But the money is already there, and we can actually do it. It just requires a willingness and a courage to do it.
So one would say that you've never been in public office, you've never run for office. So as a businessman, why you? Why now? Why do you think that you can be governor of Maryland?
It's not just that I've had business success. It's not just that I've created thousands of jobs in the state and that I've enabled thousands and hundreds of thousands to move into jobs nationally. It's not just that, although obviously there are examples of that nationally. The difference is that this topic is what I have been working on. The idea of how do we unlock growth? How do we create jobs and enable pathways into jobs for wide swaths of our communities who are stuck in jobs that are close to minimum wage, where we're still making the same amount 30 years later. That's the problem. In Maryland, if we don't find pathways to jobs that pay at least $30, $35, $40 an hour for each of us, we're poor in Maryland. Whether the minimum wage is $12 an hour or $15 an hour or $20 an hour, that is poverty in this state. And the issue is that we haven't created the pathways that need to be created.
And so as governor, obviously a lot of agencies will fall under you, Department of Transportation, Department of the Environment, Education, and it sounds like your vision at least, or at least how you're laying out this campaign, is that it's all connected through the economy. When those sectors all succeed, our economy succeeds and we succeed as a citizenry. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. So I'll give you some examples. So, obviously I've been spending the last few months traveling around the state. And in Montgomery County, for example, we have lots of conversations about traffic, and we have lots of conversations about expanding roads. So my mother was involved in Montgomery County politics in the late 70s and early 80s. In the late 70s and early 80s, what we were talking about in Montgomery County was expanding roads. When I was involved volunteering in Montgomery County politics in the late 90s, what we were talking about was expanding roads. We're now still talking about expanding roads. So, we can talk about roads and we can talk about public transportation, and every Democratic candidate is going to say, of course we need to fully fund public transportation, but the bigger problem still isn't solved. And what I would suggest is if our jobs were closer to us, we wouldn't have to spend as much time commuting. If we turn these ideas on their head, we can actually change how we think about them. It will cost us less money, and we can actually solve the problem instead of having the same conversation literally 50 years later that we were having 50 years ago, to fundamentally change the underpinnings of our economy and how these systems fit together in order to make this all work. And what that takes, frankly, is someone who hasn't necessarily been a political figure or hasn't necessarily been aspiring to political office for a long time, but someone who just wants to solve the problem. And that's why I'm here.
Well, I want to thank you for stopping past. I know you're busy here at Mako. You've got a lot of people to meet and hands to shake. Is there anything that you'd like to leave our viewers with? Any last thoughts before we wrap up?
So, what I would say is that this is possible. That it is possible to build a state where each of us has a pathway at least to a middle-income job. It takes a lot of work. It takes the courage to challenge some assumptions that we've had for a very long time, but it is possible. But it takes a willingness to do it. That's why I'm here, and that's why I'm hoping that your viewers will join me in this effort, and not to do too much of a self-interested plug, but folks can follow us online at Mike, the number 4MD, on social media platforms, or can go to our website at mikerosenbaum.com. So
well, thank you.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for joining us on Conversations with HJM.